Thanks for joining us. I'm taking over from my colleagues, Hakim Rahman as well as Shazwani. We're covering Niaga AWANI this morning. This is because this is the first morning that we're taking over from the elections. And of course, a lot must be said and must be talked about in terms of what's happening on the equities side as well as just general investment mood. I have two guests with me this morning, quite illustrious actually. On my right is Azmi Zulkifli, the CEO of Invest KL, and on his right I have Wong Wai Ken, the country director for Stashaway. But before we jump into the conversations of our guests this morning, let's take a look into the equities, the conversation. This is because CGS CIMB has issued a statement or a research paper which has talked about some of the ideas following the election, and of course it's not quite flattering in terms of the outlook of what is going to be expected for this this morning. This is largely because the statements coming in from CGS CIMB has shown that the direction of the conversation right now is they're looking at a negative outlook, particularly in terms of the sectors pertaining to gaming, pertaining to alcohol, basically sin taxes, and we're looking at this being a problematic sector for problematic outlook for these sectors. But the quick take for from CGS CIMB is that Malaysia's 15th general election last Sunday ended with our first ever hung parliament. Pakatan Harapan won the most seats, but Perikatan National Chairman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin has said that he has enough support to form the next government. Here on Astro AWANI, we'll be bringing some of the developments on this topic. Some of my colleagues are already at the palace, in fact precisely at Pintu 2 or door 2 of the palace, and further updates will be brought to you by my colleagues Najib Aruf and Haris Ashraf Hasnan very shortly at 11 o'clock. And CGS CIMB thinks that the market will likely react negatively to the news of a hung parliament, as the GE15 results did lead to more uncertainties for Malaysia, at least for the past 3 days. CGS CIMB expects a potential negative share price reactions to gaming, brewers, banks and utilities in a PN-led government or Perikatan National-led government. CGS CIMB is projecting a cut to the KLCI target to 1,484 points. As of this morning, the FBM KLCI in early trade, the first 7 minutes of early trade, saw 14 points drop or shedding to 1,435 points. 350 million shares done. It's actually quite heavy trading this morning if you think about it, if you compare against the past 2 weeks. Valued at about 200 million ringgit. FBM KLCI is awashed with red. Red not with Pakatan Harapan, but red because of the selling. 421 counters are in the red. Only 43 counters are in the green. In fact, let's talk about the greens right now. 12 cent up, MISC Berhad to 7 ringgit 32 cent. 8 cent MFCB to 3 ringgit 36 cent. FPI is up 8 cent to 3 ringgit 26 cent. DNEX is up 6 cent to 57 cent. Otherwise, mostly, of course, one more. Sime Darby is up 2 cent to, let me see, oh my God, it's really jumping up and down my board this morning to 2 ringgit 22 cent. So scratch that. Over 440 counters are in the red, only 20 counters are in the green. So yeah, it's probably going to be like this, at least for early trade. So let's bring in our conversations right now with our guests. Let's start off with Azmi. Azmi, a lot of investors, both domestic and international investors, are trying to make sense of this as much as we are, as Rakyat Malaysia. What would be some of the important keynotes that we need to think about moving ahead, particularly when it comes to calming investor sentiment right now?
Well, as the process, the democracy process of forming the government as well as appointment of the Prime Minister takes its course, this is where it's a need for any government that comes in, hopefully by today or even later by tomorrow, to be able to create that stability as well as that positive messaging to the markets. You shared some of the numbers just now, and we hope we can buck the trend from there. What the government needs to do is to demonstrate as well as communicate the right policies as well as put in the right procedures to get the economy going again. We have a lot of challenges in front of us.
Let's talk about the challenges very shortly. Let's bring in Ken right now. What do you think? Do you agree with what Azmi has shared this morning?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need stability, right? We've had 3 different governments in the last 5 years. What we hope for the next 5 is more stability. After the last GE, we saw some volatility, some reaction to GLCs and the like. So today's picture is different. It's a little bit more nuanced, and it'll probably be a broad sell-off until we get a new government and a new cabinet in place.
Okay, let's talk to the studio director. If you can mirror my iPad, because I want to show you the movement of ringgit this morning. Once we get that up for now, but while he tries to figure out the okay, there you go. That's the ringgit movement this morning. I really don't know what else to say. It's a steep drop in terms of how the ringgit movement this morning is. It's just drop. Now, if you look at the 1-month movement, it's actually quite not promising as well, because you should look at this graph invertly, because as the line goes up, it means that the ringgit is weakening. So yeah, back to Cam, Director. Let's talk about this as well. So ringgit is just fallen off the cliff. Initially, we were trying to temper the whole conversation of how ringgit is weak against the dollar, but then again, almost all currencies are weak against the dollar. And then we should look at, say, ringgit versus yen, ringgit versus pound, ringgit versus other currencies. But generally speaking, from that drop that we saw this morning, it's not going to be any better, at least for the next few days. This is the part where we need to really talk about what would the new government look like or think about. So let's talk about the challenges. As you alluded to the challenges, what would be the 2 or 3 challenges that we need to navigate?
Yeah, with the government in place, they need to be communicating the right information as well as the right activities as a way forward. To put it simply, to lay down all the plans with what we have today. For example, we've got the 12 Malaysia plan in place. It is still very much relevant. We need to roll that out. The agenda towards digital, that needs to be driven as well. As we put the country into the right perspective towards the businesses of the future. Putting that all together as well, we cannot discount the fact of the pressures toward a sustainable investment climate or ecosystem. That has to be in place, where we need to put all the companies together, multinationals, local, foreign, as well as the markets as well, to drive the initiative as a way forward. All this together needs a lot of conviction as well as roll out at every level of the markets as well as every level of the economy. And this has to be driven strongly by the leadership when they assume power.
Okay, Ken, what do you think?
Yeah, there are a lot of uncertainties right now. Who's the figurehead? What does the cabinet look like? Who's the Minister of Finance? Will they confirm the budget that was just tabled in Parliament? What's the outlook for policy, economic policy? Will it be populist like the years before? Or will it be reformist, where you nip things in the bud like inflation and the weakening ringgit, right? So I think all these things bode to a market that, yeah, is mostly in the red.
You know, let's talk about the budget, since Ken, you touched on this very interestingly enough. The budget was presented by a Kerajaan Barisan Nasional, by Tengku Zafrul, senator. By the way, he's still a senator, technically speaking. And technically speaking, he can still be brought into the Dewan Rakyat yet again. All right, now let's talk about technicals here. But at the same time, he lost the Kuala Selangor seat. There's a lot of conversations into whether or not he should be allowed back in the cabinet. He should be allowed to take back the mantle in terms of finance ministry. If that is the case, I think we should really expect a fresh budget, don't you think? In terms of it's no longer Barisan Nasional, it's no longer Tengku Zafrul. So it is Perikatan Nasional. If it is Perikatan Nasional, let's remind ourselves that because as of last night, late last night, around 11 o'clock, the Pakatan Harapan chairman, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, did say that he have the biggest numbers as well, and he has enough. However, it did not mention the parties supporting him. He did not, and he continued on saying that let the political parties announce. It's not his place to announce who is within the camp of Pakatan Harapan to lift him up as the 10th Prime Minister. So, while we can go on the trajectory of Tan Sri Muhyiddin being the next Prime Minister, let's not discount this fact that Datuk Sri Anwar is going to be the next Prime Minister as well. So because of this, we need to look at what the realities are. What would be some of the simulations that you think in terms of the budget being presented, or is there a conversation of mini budget as well being presented in the new weeks to come? Maybe Ken.
Yeah, I think we have to avoid what the UK did and present a mini budget that really weakens the bonds and also the currency. I think there were a few good things about the last budget that would be helpful on a broad base. Reducing of taxation on the middle class and increase on taxation for the upper class, and also an increase in the availability to invest in ASB up to 300,000. So a few positive things. But I think what is missing is who will be providing the inputs. If it is PH, I think you will see more assistance towards, targeted assistance towards people that need the help. If it's PN, for example, then it will be probably more shorter-term, medium-term focus, right? How do we help people right now?
Okay. Azmin, do you think that the PN possible budget could look a bit similar to BN, or do you think that there's some sort of reform that is going to be put in place here?
Well, the recent budget that was tabled in October, that has gone through an extensive process with regards to engagement with industry, with the social community, as well as in preparation of all that, which has related into a budget that was tabled in October. Now, we should not go into the process again, but rather revisit some of the keener points that will probably be highlights of what we should prepare better for 2023, right? And from there alone, drive into a more focused effort. We know that in the horizon, all the headwinds are coming with regards to the signals of recession in 2023. How do we prepare for that? At the end of the year, we need to prepare for the calamities or the act of God or possible rain as well as floods in the country as well. And at the same time, to continue to drive what needs to be done from an economic perspective to give that positive connotations towards markets as well as the ecosystem.
All right, let's pull up my mirror, our visual right now as well. So as of this morning, let's pull up the iPad, yeah. As of this morning, the Election Commission has announced that P20 Baram election will take place today. This is consistent with what, this is quite surprising, but this is not what we thought it would be. We thought it would be consistent with Padang Serai, which is on 7th of December. So there could be still adding of seats into the coalition. So this is the part where, the uncertainty revolves, where people might not know the whole coalition makeup, whether or not they have enough seats and such, and whether or not these seats will further be added to the respective coalitions. Because of this, do you feel that investors are taking a wait and see, or as per Testament this morning, 18 points now shedding. We're looking at 1,432 points at the FBM KLCI. So, yeah, is this sell-off going to continue, is basically what I'm saying. Maybe Ken?
Yeah, I think this is more of a holding pattern. Even though it's down 18 points, it's still within the range. I don't think it's a deep enough sell-off to be a referendum on where the country is going just yet, obviously because of the uncertainty. I think a couple of seats that haven't been held yet could tip the balance, but it all depends on 2 p.m. today. And if it's, at least the brokers have projected that if it is a PN led government, then things will look not as good, not as positive. I think the market is more supportive of a PH government.
Okay. Azmi, let's draw back on what you have seen this past year. Maybe you can share with us the kind of investors that have come in, not just this year, but the past few years, and the outlook as well on investors coming into Greater KL.
Sure. In the past year, or in the past 2 years especially, we know that we've gone through an unprecedented time. No doubt there has been some process of democracy where we saw changes within the government. However, I must say that a number of policies and procedures with regards to business as well as investment have continued to be stable. This shows something very clearly, that the investors respect the democracy process. However, we need to ensure that we continue to drive the right messaging as well as looking at how we can continue to attract the right investments as a way forward. The landscape is very challenging. However, this year it has been very strong with investments in Greater Kuala Lumpur, where we see our results being over than the results of last year. As at Q3 of this year, we would have exceeded our total investments from 2021. And that's a positive process. And the pipeline is healthy as well. And that goes back to all the stable policies and the plans that Malaysia has in place that needs to be rolled out. We are talking about the activities in digital. We are talking about sustainable investment, which must be driven as well, and inclusivity to ensure that the country prosper. And throughout the country, we could see a lot of spillover as well from economy, creation of the right jobs, as well as looking at trading and how we progress when we look at it in terms of numbers as well as the variables.
Okay, let's talk about some of the conversation in terms of what the analysts are saying this morning. The CGS CIMB analyst report this morning says that the market will react negatively to the following news of the hung parliament. G15 has failed, for a few reasons actually. So they presented about 4 points. The first point, according to CGS CIMB, is that G15 has failed to resolve Malaysia's political instability and may even lead to more uncertainty, of which my guests this morning is trying to untangle and perhaps outline what would be some of these uncertainties. The second point that CGS CIMB is arguing is that the market may have partially priced in a win for the incumbent BN, and yet BN was the biggest loser this morning in terms of GE. Actually, the biggest loser should be Pejuang. But regardless of that, that priced-in conversation of how market pricing in for a potentially incumbent win for BN, but that didn't materialize. Now PN is going to perhaps lead the government. That is a big issue there. The third reason why market uncertainty could be in the air is because investors may have concerns over the strong showing by PAS. As we know that that's an Islamist party, and whether or not there could be also concerns similar to those in the past of the fragility and potential alliances due to their differing ideologies, i.e. PAS's ideology being different from the rest of the coalitions that has won following the GE15. Now, CGS CIMB argues that taking a leaf from history, when the opposition parties did well against Barisan Nasional in 2008 and 2018, the KLCI fell 3% and 6% respectively 1 month after GE12 and GE14. If a PN-led government comes into power, which we will know soon enough at 1 or 2 p.m. this morning, CGS CIMB expects potential negative share price reactions again for banks, gaming, construction, brewery sectors. If, and this is what CGS CIMB is arguing this morning, in a Pakatan Harapan-led government is formed, it could be negative for telco. Not too sure why, maybe my guests will elaborate this morning. But however, the manifestos of both potential governments, i.e. Pakatan Harapan and Perikatan government, are friendly to consumers, pharmaceutical and infrastructure spending in Sarawak. CGS CIMB expects significant stock market volatility in the longer term. CGS expects a positive if the new government takes steps towards institutional and political reform. And just to reiterate, CGS CIMB cuts their KLCI target to 1,484 points for the end of this year to reflect short-term political uncertainties. As of this morning, before we head off to the break, as of this morning, the FBM KLCI continues to shed its price, and we'll bring you more of these conversations very shortly. We'll go for a short break. Thanks for continuing on with us. I have with me in the studio Wong Wai Ken, the Country Director of Stashaway, as well as Azmi Zulkifli, the CEO of Invest KL. Some quick updates in terms of the movement of the ringgit against major currencies this morning. Against the dollar, we are shedding about, 34%. We're looking at 4 ringgit 57 cents. Singapore is actually 3 ringgit 32 cents. Yen is 3 ringgit 32 yen, or 300 yen actually, 326 yen. The British pound strengthening at 5 ringgit 43 cents. Euro is at 4 ringgit 72 cents. So, you know, as we continue to get back to my iTrade account, which I again constantly being logged out. It's holding at, the holding pattern is there, Ken, you're right, 18 points to 1,431 points. 700 shares done, first 25 minutes of trading. This is, I guess, back to the olden days where we saw about 3 billion ringgit traded in a day. But for the past 2 weeks, it's actually quite sluggish at about 1 point something billion shares being done. So that is quite interesting to note. But 504 shares are in the red, 108 counters are in the green. The sell-off continues on. So I need to ask you about the whole idea of what CGS-CIMB says in the analyst report. Do you think that investors have priced in a BN win and are now reacting towards the notion that PN and the big notion of how PAS is inside that coalition is there? Do you feel that they're reacting to that, Ken?
Yeah, market doesn't like surprises, and the big surprise was how strong the showing was for PAS. And I think if you look back into history, you will see that breweries or gaming companies tend not to do so well. But I think the reality is that after the government is formed, you will then see which ones tend to get into the favor of the government, who wins contracts, who gets special projects. So all this will pan out. But what you're seeing now is a broad reaction to the surprises, right? So the construction company is going down, for example, is a reaction to how poorly BN did. ICT stocks will have to see whether companies like Datasonic or MyEG do well or not. But overall, I think the reality is much more nuanced than that. We have to see which companies can actually work with the government and get contracts and be catalysts for their companies.
I'm not too sure why CGS argues that if PH-led government takes place, it'll be negative for telco.
I think that has something to do with the 5G, right? So how this current government is dealing with 5G, with the centralized 5G broadband network, maybe a different direction to how PH wants to take it with the telcos.
Okay. So Azmi, let's talk about the outlook, as we alluded to before the break just now. I remember you coming on my show and you're talking about how the pipeline looks good. 2023 is a very positive year for how we want to plan ahead and attract more investors, particularly large MNCs from, say, for instance, Australia and Europe to come in. How do you see that outlook now, considering that PN might take the lead in terms of forming government and PAS being there?
The investment climate certainly has factored in a number of items. For example, the wait and see, especially during the last quarters of the year, quarter 3, quarter 4, before making a commitment to invest in the coming months. From that standpoint, all the variables are in place, whether they want to decide to go to invest in Malaysia, in the country, and now it is proper that we have that conversations with them. Certainly, we do need the government to be in place, so that we've got a lot more credibility to be saying that policies will be intact and the focus towards foreign investments into the country will be on the pillars of some industries as well as some of the newer technologies that's coming in. So all that has to fall in place before an announcement or before commitments will be made. Now, with regards to whichever government that comes into power, this is probably where there needs to be a close collaboration to really understand what's on the table here and what are the positives into attracting investments into the country and areas that we need to focus on to improve the investment climate in the country. We are, or because of this process, we have been missing from the APEC summit.
Okay.
I mean, at that level. We were represented by the Chief Secretary of the country. Even at COP27 recently, what's the messaging that people are watching that the country is communicating or will be communicating? And these are some of the things that we need to all put into the perspective to see and to ensure that the right messages are out in the market.
You know, speaking about that, right, let's talk about some news development this morning. According to Starbase, which has reported this, Malaysia is still committed to the APEC summit or Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation goals of mitigating climate change, for instance, and attracting sustainable investments into the region. This is coming in from the Ministry of International Trade and Industry, interestingly enough, your ministry, Azmi. And the ministry also stated that the 2022 Leaders' Declaration pledged to intensify efforts towards inclusive economic recovery and post-pandemic is still to be continued. See, this is the part where you were right. Some of the policies need to be continued regardless of who comes into power. And do you feel that the intention to signal this, the continuity of some policies, which quite frankly is good for everyone and anyone, right? Sustainable development goals and many more. Do you feel that this needs to be shouted out as soon as whoever takes office, because this perhaps could calm the markets even better?
Yes, the positive news that comes from this statement about the recent APEC summit is certainly welcome. What the investors as well as the markets are looking is to hear it from the minister himself, the newly elected minister, to reiterate some of these policies. And do not forget the policies that are also that have been launched 2 or 3 years ago. For example, the Industry 4.0 policy that is today 4-year-old, that needs to be driven as well. And the new investment policy that's also was launched 2 months ago, that needs to be reinforced as well as reaffirmed that this is the way for the future for the country in terms of the investment landscape in the next 10 years. So all in all the variables are on the table. We just need to reaffirm the markets as well as having a clear direction of where we want to go as a country from an industry as well as investment standpoint.
Okay, let's do a quick recap. It's 9:33 in the morning. The local stock market is seeing a big movement here. The local stock market investors are dumping shares in early trade as Malaysia faces a hung parliament situation after the 15th general election. As at 9:32 this morning, the FBM KLCI fell 16 points to 1,432 points. 825 million shares are done, valued at about 460 million ringgit. 524 counters are in the red, 117 counters are in the green. The expected downtrend saw decliners lead gainers, and because of this, we're looking at the turnover standing at a very high pace right now at about 450 million ringgit shares done. Meanwhile, in other news, the labour market continued its recovery at a steady pace in the third quarter of this year, with the unemployment rate lowered to 3.7% from 4.7% a year ago, and slowly returning to how it was before the pandemic. The Department of Statistics said that in line with this, the number of unemployed persons decreased by 18% to 611,000 persons, or 612,000 persons actually, from 750,000 people recorded in the same period last year. In terms of labour supply for the third quarter of this year, the number of employed persons rose by 3.6% to 15.83 million. Again, number of employed persons rose to 15.83 million people against the same quarter of the preceding year, which recorded about 15.7 million persons. And of course, one more item that we need to talk about is, of course, export trade data. Malaysia's October exports expanded at the slowest rate in 15 months, growing 15% year-on-year to 131 billion ringgit, driven by increases in domestic exports and re-exports. The export value was lower than the 144 billion ringgit recorded in September. Meanwhile, for October exports, it increased to 29.2% year-on-year to 113 billion ringgit. This brought total trade in the month of October to 245 billion ringgit. As imports grew faster than exports, the trade surplus shrank 18 billion ringgit versus a record high of 32 billion ringgit in September this year. So 2 points that I want to talk to you, gentlemen. Labour market and exports. I spoke to enough guests that were talking about how the new government must address these two items, especially on the labour element and upskilling and reskilling. I saw the manifesto, I read the manifesto of Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional. They were very clear on how they want to improve on the upskilling, reskilling and retraining of the workers. Perikatan Nasional's manifesto is scant on the details on this one. And considering that Perikatan Nasional might take office, do you feel that this is another area of concern for some investors, employers, and of course the SME sector? Maybe Ken, you can share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the Malaysian economy is still recovering from COVID, and I think the saving grace there is really the oil price and palm oil price and strong E&E manufacturing exports that have helped keep the economy afloat. And while there's still some issues around unemployment, you can see it's going down, but the real issue there is also underemployment, right? I think a significant portion of that is with gig workers or people that are not earning as much. Wage growth has been very stagnant. So I think that there are still fragile issues there. And stemming from that, you will also see some fragility when it comes to their retirement savings. People were allowed to draw from their EPF. 90 to 100 billion was withdrawn in those 4 schemes. So we'll see some weakness down the line, and that needs to be addressed by the new government. All in all, I think the economy is still in a decent place, although it's fragile from its recovery. But I think if those factors that I mentioned earlier are not there to support us, we could see, like some people are suggesting, a recession, and I hope not a deep one.
But we have to prepare for that, right? You think about it. I mean, we can't put our heads in the sand like an ostrich. We have to face the truth and realities of it. If a recession is happening globally and it might hit us, what will be some of the plans moving forward? I mean, these are the questions that we need to answer. Azmi, let's talk about the 2 items just now, the imports and exports conversation. The multinationals that come into our country, at least for this year, one of the reasons why they came into the country is because of our labour structure and, of course, our ability for us to provide the infrastructure that is needed for them to operate. Anywhere from great highways and ports to just the language. Many of us are proficient in English, and this enables them to operate better. But the political climate, I remember you saying to me in my show, on my show, that the political climate wasn't necessarily a key factor for them coming here. Do you think that that consideration will still hold, or do you think that because of this uncertainty, that might be a factor moving forward for investors that have come here, and of course more investors that is thinking about coming here?
Let me add to your comments just now. Technology as well. The technology available as well as the experienced workforce really have put in a positive connotation to investments when they come in and when they look at the opportunities here in the markets. Looking at it from that perspective, investors always have that long-term view, a mid to long-term view, a 3-year or 5-year long-term view. Certainly, there are noises in the market, also from the political standpoint. But we should not allow the noise to continue and prolong to a certain extent. Yes, probably today we are stepping up from the pandemic, that we can tolerate such democratic movements. However, we must remind ourselves to not take this situation for granted. There are many positive variables, and most importantly here, this is where we need to ease and reduce all the noises to demonstrate that we've got a stable government. The people have gone out to vote, record numbers, I imagine. And this is where, with a government in place, all this needs to be communicated, to be reaffirmed to the investors so that it does not become an issue. Once it becomes an issue, then we will be backpedaling. We will need a lot more resources as well as energy to now convince them. We've got all the plans on the table. We need to roll them out today and need to implement them as best as we could together with the industry.
Do you feel that we might lose out to some of our neighboring markets like Indonesia, Singapore or Vietnam because of them still trying to figure out what is necessary, because of us trying to figure out what is necessary for us to govern, but they've got their items sorted out? Where is our competitive level here, Azmi?
Yeah, if the situation prolong, certainly yes. It will put a dampener towards the sentiments as well as the moods in the market. And this is where is the urgency for us to be able to have a stable government and start to roll out all the initiatives that are in place. All the countries have also communicated what they need to do, and we need to take stock that we are in a very particular nice soft niche where we can attract the right type of investments to fit the country of 33 million population, knowledgeable, very strong digital penetration, as well as some of the upcoming middle class. So those are all variables that are in the right position, and we need to continue to drive this moving forward.
Ken, do you feel that some of the items that we discussed this morning actually provides better clarity in terms of investors? Because markets are opening, all the analyst reports are coming out. As of 2 p.m., we might have a new Prime Minister already. It's just that the volatility that we're going to experience is just today or tomorrow. Or do you think that the outlook is going to be a bit more volatile in the weeks to come?
I think a lot of the volatility will be this morning, and then whoever is in power, the market will react to that. If you take the last GE as an example, there was a lot of gut reaction towards the new Harapan government who came into power. GLCs were beat down, and different construction counters were beat down who were tied to the previous government, and then counters that were seen to be supportive of the PH government back then rose. So I think what you'll see here is initial gut reactions. But after that, I think the actual outlook will really depend on which company manages to work with the new government. For example, Magnum or even the 4D betting companies, actually did quite well, even during the PN and subsequent BN governments. So it's not so straightforward. You have to really see what the individual companies get up to and whether they are in line with the agenda of the government of the day.
We need to talk about that because corporate Malaysia is agnostic in terms of the morality of businesses. As long as you don't violate any laws, you're going to do the thing. Morality is a different topic here. But because of that, I just read RHB analyst report. Same thing, gaming, brewery sector remains to be in focus this morning. Ken, do you think that the PN government is going to leave these kind of sectors alone, or do you think more, what is the outlook for these sectors, in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what their plan is going forward. If they continue on their line of looking at major contracts, or at least continuing major contracts, then at least that provides some sort of catalyst to construction companies. If you see certain positions like Minister of Finance or Minister of Trade be populated by parties that are affiliated with PAS, then obviously the market gut reaction will be a little bit more negative towards those sectors you mentioned. However, I think that like the previous GE, things were done to assure the market gradually. You will have the gut reaction, but then after that, what happens gradually? A council of eminent persons was formed, the cabinet was filled, and then slowly you regain confidence. I think the Ministry of Finance is a very key role because that also reassures the outlook for the institutions and things like the ringgit. The Minister of Finance also controls a lot of GLCs and the appointments of the heads of those GLCs. And I think the market also will react to the revolving door or the constant changes at the top. So either way, whatever the market happens to eventuate, I think what's important is stability and for the institutions to really be strong. You know, institutions like Bank Negara, SC, EPF really should be strong and shouldn't be...
And independent, actually.
And independent and professional. And it shouldn't be something that is seen as a political apparatus, you know, an extension of that.
On a personal note, gentlemen, were you surprised at the outcome, or is this something that you know, because you go into the industry, you think about these things, you know? Azmi?
The outcome of the election, yes, surprised. Surprised with the results, especially in some of the northern states.
Nur Izzah losing, for instance, that was a shocker for me. But
right.
I was reading an article, basically, because of some of the reasons presented on the ground, she was unable to deliver some of the, you know, grassroots issues, and her opponent, Ustaz Fawaz, was already doing the groundwork then. Initial reaction, initial shock was there, but then when you look at the rationality of things, suddenly you realize, okay, there could be some reasons why these candidates won. But yeah, what about BN's poor showing? Did that surprise you?
Yes, as well, because a lot of predictions are saying that all three coalitions will be having about the same number of votes. And with them down at only about 30 seats, if I recall, that is quite a surprise too.
Ken, was the result surprising?
Yes, it was. I think a few research houses also said that BN would come out strong. They were the ones who were calling the shots. They called the elections early by a year. And if you did that, you would think that, yes, I have all my apparatus in place and I'm assured of a victory, but they had their poorest showing. The last election, they still had 70 seats. So they've lost a lot of that now at 30. And then the emergence of a new alternative for Malay voters who turn to PN and specifically PAS is something that we all have to react to.
Azmi, do you think that, I'm just going to ask you bluntly then, do you think investors are afraid of PAS?
On the surface, maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. Simply because we could see all this swing in any other country as well. But at the end of the day, whether it impacts the actual industry, policy making, that's probably where we need to demonstrate that we continue to be independent from that angle. Tying
this statement that you made with the initial reaction that you witnessed on the wee hours of the 20th of November, were you anxious about the direction of the country? Were you stable in terms of how you think, okay, it's okay, these are the results, moving forward we should do this? Just on a personal note, I guess.
Sure. I guess it's a bit more stable because we have seen those changes from 2018 up to today. So what else could happen, right? In that particular instance, to really ensure that we share that communication and work with whoever comes into power, and demonstrate that we are all here working for the country, to drive economy, create jobs, as well as industry and things like that, right? And let's put aside all the negative connotations of the election and put it to rest. And now it's time to work for the country.
Let's pull up some of the news that we have this morning. In a strategy note, RHB research said, Alexander Chia said that while the hung parliament was the base case scenario, so it's not worst case, it's not best case, according to RHB at least, they present that as a base case. The strong electoral performance by the PN coalition was a surprise, and he expects regulatory risks to spike higher, especially for some of the sectors that we discussed this morning, gaming, brewery, tobacco. RHB argues that investors could remain wary of construction-related stocks. So this is a new item, a little bit different from, say, CGSM this morning, given the sector's dependence on policy implementation. So that's an idea that RHB is sharing this morning. Meanwhile, Perikatan Chairman Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin said that he will show today the statutory declarations, or SD, signed by members of parliaments as proof that the coalition has enough numbers and support to form the government. My colleague is at the palace gates at Pintu Dua, to be frank, and we're going to cross over to my colleagues in about half an hour from now to bring up some updates from there as well. In the continuation of the conversation this morning, Muhyiddin says that the claims by Barisan Nasional Chairman Datuk Sri Zahid Hamidi said that BN had never discussed with GPS about offering BN stands support to PN in order to form the government will not prevent Perikatan Nasional from forming the federal government with the support of these MPs. Just to give a quick recap, Barisan Nasional MPs might not necessarily be in the same, might not necessarily have the same ideas with Barisan Nasional Chairman Zaid Hamidi. So that's another angle that we need to talk about. Gentlemen, I'm not going to punish you for what you think about the political dynamics on that particular topic is, but generally speaking, that is some of the ideas that we're facing. Is BN with one heart and one mind in terms of forming a new conversation? And again, I would subject you to that particular conversation. All right, meanwhile, because of the uncertainties in terms of the GE15, RHB, in another research notes, argues that the uncertainties over the timing of the retabling of Budget 2023 will be in the air. Cash transfers and gradual fiscal consolidation will remain high on the agenda, and whichever combination of the political parties ends up taking Putrajaya, this remains to be the topic of the day. This is coming in from RHB Research and the economists there. They also argue that the timeline for the retabling of Budget 2023, which according to RHB is ideally should be presented by December this year, is uncertain following the possible changes in the ruling coalition and would very much depend on the timing of the cabinet formation. Based on the latest developments, the balance of the risks is tilted towards a delay in budget retabling following the election of a new government. Again, just to repeat, RHB is of the opinion that because of the latest developments, the balance of the risks is tilted towards a delay in budget retabling following the new government. And they also added that there will be a period of uncertainty until a new coalition government is formed. Meanwhile, before we toss it back to my guests, the ringgit has slipped further against the US dollar this morning, extending the week's downtrend as the first ever hung parliament hits us at 9:51 a.m. Ringgit slid 290 basis points to 4 ringgit 57 against the US dollar from Thursday's close of 4 ringgit 55 to the US dollar. The market was closed last Friday. Of course, this is to enable voters to cast their votes. It is opening this morning, and a quick check on FBM KLCI. There's a lot of gains that has been made. The FBM KLCI saw the dip at 18 points at one point, is down only 10 points right now as of 9:52 a.m. To 1,439 points, or a slid of 0.71%. There's a lot more counters gaining this morning, almost 1 hour into trade, with 174 counters have made gains. Meanwhile, 526 counters have made losses this morning. So as you can see, there was an initial reaction, just a lot of sell-off, but the gains are slowly coming back as we progress towards this morning. I think that the market is trying to just continue to price in some of the uncertainties clearly, and I hesitate to look into the gaming sectors, you know, but you know, why not? Carlsberg is down 1 ringgit 14 cent to 22 ringgit 6 cent. Well, 1 ringgit 14 cent is a big drop. Magnum is down 14 cent. Not big actually, to 1 ringgit 36 cent. Just some ideas to think about. Maybe Genting 25 cent negative to 4 ringgit 23 cent. You know, yeah. So, I'm just pulling up some sectors here, and I don't want to go coded, but these are the sectors that might be looking at a negative outlook, as per argued by CGS-CIMB and RHB as of this morning. I'm pretty sure all the research houses are coming. Yeah, do you think independence can be achieved in terms of how this government is going to keep off these sectors? Ken?
No, I think it will. You will see a broad kind of downturn in terms of the growth of these companies, but I actually don't think it's as bad as the previous changes in government. Some of these counters actually limit down at some point, and the fact that they're only down so little, I think is a good sign that at least there's hope for the PN government maybe to be a little bit more moderate. And I think that even though PAS has a strong showing, the other people in the coalition is putting a bit of a moderate cover on the whole thing. So I actually don't think that the worst fears will eventuate. And
one topic that I want to talk about before we pass the baton over to my colleagues, maybe Azmi, you can take this up. The role of the opposition. Whoever ends up being the opposition, at this point in time, it's Pakatan Harapan, it looks like it, but like I said, never discount. The politics arena is the realm of all possibilities. Where do you see the role of opposition coming into good governance and supervision and basically bringing the best out of those in government? Do you feel that the role of the opposition now is more accentuated more than ever? Or are they going to be, you know, I guess, carrying the same kind of role as before?
That is the pillar of democracy, actually, as we want to drive the country forward. Both the government as well as the opposition needs to remember what are the priorities today. One of the priorities was mentioned just now, tabling of the budget, as well as having a good discussion on it and agreeing to a certain point as 2023 is not too far away. And that's a very important there. Within the manifesto, the drive towards improving processes towards rationalization as well as transformation of some areas within the business as well as the social sector needs to be driven on both sides. And this is where we wanted to see that maturity from the government as well as the opposition to have a good deliberation as the country moves forward with our plans.
Ken, final word, perhaps to some of our investors and just folks like us, people in the corporate sector and SME. We haven't even touched at all about that, but yeah, final word.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing here is a continuation of more on the same of the last 5 years. A lot of political uncertainty. Foreign shareholding has fallen to the low 20s, and that could be seen as certain quarters not being so hopeful about Malaysia. I think as investors, you need to diversify globally. There's certainly better risk return to be gotten in foreign markets as well, particularly index funds like the S&P. If you just follow that index, your portfolio would have done a lot better than if you just kept your money in Malaysia. Unfortunately, Malaysia is a bit of a stock pickers market. You have to be very discerning about what you buy and sell as opposed to just buying the whole index. So you need to do more homework in that sense. But with funds like ASB or EPF as your part of your personal portfolio already, perhaps it's time to look at diversifying globally, right? There are a lot more assets and a better risk return as well. And institutions are doing that. Their investments overseas have slowly increased through these years. So I think local investors should do the same.
Azmi, final word?
Well, putting into context all the activities that are happening today, we are certainly hopeful of the government coming in and time to work together with the new government, with the industry, opposition playing that role to return that confidence back to the market from an investment, trade, as well as industry perspective. We have just exited the pandemic stage. A lot more work needs to be done, and a lot of the recovery process needs to also take place, and we have to come together as a country to drive these changes.
Back to work. That's a very good statement, Azmi, because I think enough politicking for the past, 4 or 5 years now. I think that's a very, very good, call or reminder for all of us. Get back to work, friends. That's an area that we need to think about. Okay, you just heard from Azmi Zulkifli, the CEO of Invest KL, and earlier on you just heard from Wong Wai Ken, the country director at Stashaway. Just a reminder, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong has given the coalition leaders until 2 p.m. today to prove their claims. The statement also has come from the Speaker of the House, Art Harun, and of course we will be bringing you all the updates. Continue on to stay with us. This is, of course, the 15th General Election channel for you. Thanks again for your support. Do reach out to each and every one of us, either at 501 AWANI on all our social platforms or to the anchors directly. You probably have the handle, either Twitter handle or Facebook handles or even IG handles to all of us. So do reach out to us directly. We are going to be bringing you all the breaking news there. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. I am Ibrahim Sani signing off and passing over to my colleagues. Over to you.